Hi, my name is John, I am 76 years old, and I would like to share an experience I had in 1969 when I was just 22 years old. At that time, I lived in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That moment was very significant for me and remains vivid in my memory to this day. I will narrate how it happened. I remember it was a Saturday night. I was with my friends and my brothers, chatting and relaxing with some drinks, enjoying the weekend together. Then, around 7:20 p.m., we decided to call it a night and everyone went home. The atmosphere was very calm, but since we lived nearby, we always had a lot of fun. At that time, I was still single and we were 3 brothers. Our father had passed away in a work accident, and our mother died during childbirth when I was born. My father was a dedicated man and worked hard. He managed to acquire a piece of land and build the house where we lived, always making sure we lacked nothing. My brothers and I were able to study, but they had to drop out in the 5th grade when they realized how exhausted our father was from working every day from Sunday to Sunday. So, Tyler and William decided to find jobs to help at home. I continued in school until I finished elementary education, but then I also had to work. Our routine followed this way. One night, after a tiring day of work, I went to bed. As soon as I fell asleep, I had a very strange dream, or rather, a nightmare. But it wasn't like the others I had experienced before. In the nightmare, I was in the woods with my friend Owen, near a road. We had machetes in our hands and I asked him what we were doing there. Owen looked at me and said that I was the one who had asked him to come along. I felt a bit embarrassed about that, but I decided to keep going since we were far from home. We walked and talked until, suddenly, I realized I had no idea where we were going. I was just following him. Then, something interrupted our conversation. An unusual noise came from the woods as if something was chewing. My friend and I crouched down, stayed silent, and carefully moved forward until we reached a small stream. At night, that place became even more sinister and dark. It was almost impossible to see, but we could feel that something was very close. Then, in a matter of seconds, 2 orange eyes appeared. That thing started approaching us slowly, looking like some kind of shadow. Right after that, I woke up startled. I got up, had coffee, and went out for a walk. To give you some context, I am 5 feet 5 inches, 1.65 meters, tall and slim. I have always been used to waking up early and taking a walk before going to work. It was Sunday and I had the day off, so after returning from my walk, my older brother Tyler invited me to go fishing at the beach with him and his friends. Since I had no plans, I accepted the invitation. We went and enjoyed a peaceful afternoon. We met some friends who, by chance, were also there. They usually didn't go to that place at that time of year, so it was nice to see them again. Sometime later, we were about to leave when a few girls showed up. Like any young guy, I decided to stay a little longer to see if anything interesting would happen. The atmosphere was so festive that it felt like a carnival. After a few hours, we went back home. It was already 6:30 p.m. when our friend Noah arrived, telling us he had discovered a cabin in the forest days earlier. He mentioned that he had entered and found many things inside, including gold coins. My brothers and I exchanged glances, skeptical of the story and questioned whether it was really true. At that moment, Noah pulled a giant coin out of his pocket and showed it to us. Without any further argument, we believed him. My middle brother, William, asked where the cabin was, and Noah replied that it was beyond the bridge. Tyler noted that the place was quite far and mentioned that someone might be living there. However, Noah claimed that, given the state of the cabin, it was unlikely anyone lived there. Then, our friend asked if we were interested in going to the place. I exchanged glances with my brothers and we all agreed. Before leaving, we stopped at home to store the fish we had caught, changed clothes, and grabbed some flashlights as it was already getting dark. Each of us took a backpack. William and Owen carried shotguns, while Tyler, Noah, and I took machetes and flashlights. We agreed to meet at the entrance of the forest, near a church. Once everyone arrived, Tyler, William, Noah, Owen, and we started walking, following our friends' directions. I'm not sure how many miles we walked, but I think it was about 6. After walking so much, we reached a small barrier. As soon as I saw that place, a feeling of familiarity washed over me, though I couldn't remember why it seemed familiar. At that moment, a certain apprehension took hold of me, as if something was about to happen. Still, I remained silent because I didn't want to be labeled a coward or become the target of jokes. However, my perception and senses were on high alert. As soon as we left that spot, my brother Tyler, who had always been able to read me well, noticed that something was wrong. He pulled me aside and asked why I was so tense. Reluctant to share, I eventually admitted that, while walking down the road, I realized that place seemed familiar to me. Tyler didn't believe in supernatural phenomena and, somewhat sarcastically, told me to relax and not alarm anyone. I didn't like his attitude and thought it would have been wiser if he had just kept quiet. Finally, we arrived at the cabin. As we entered, illuminated by the flashlight, we saw several things that really caught our attention. We found a chest, and upon opening it, we discovered numerous gold coins. At that moment, I could only think about my newfound wealth. Anxious about the situation, we grabbed our backpacks and started stuffing them with coins. At the bottom of the chest, there was a peculiar book with a worn black cover. There was something written on its pages, but I couldn't decipher it because the darkness was too dense, and the language was unknown. Believing it to be a relic, I decided to put it in my backpack as well. Then we quickly left the place, fearful that someone might show up. A little later, as we were already a good distance from the cabin, we were quite excited, but that excitement didn't last long. We started hearing sounds coming from the forest, slow, heavy footsteps approaching us. We froze on the spot and considered the possibility that it was another person, but if that were the case, why wouldn't they have a flashlight? It was nighttime and the darkness was total. I had already lost track of time. Then Noah asked who was there, but nothing happened. Even shining our flashlights around, we saw no one. The feeling that something bad was about to happen only grew stronger. Just as I was about to speak to the group, we heard a hoarse voice of an old man wishing us good night, and saying that we shouldn't be there. We turned around and between the trees, a frail old man appeared, dressed in rags. He was very thin and had a huge beard. When we shone our flashlights on his face, we noticed that his eyes were completely black. At that moment, terror took hold of us. William asked if he was the owner of the cabin behind us, and the old man, turning to us, replied that we had something that belonged to him. Immediately, we thought of the coins and said we hadn't taken anything from him. With a voice full of anger, he said that was a lie and started to approach. William, who had the shotgun, turned and pointed it at him, ordering him to stay where he was. However, even in the face of the weapon, the old man did not back away. Owen also raised his gun, but the man still showed no fear. In fact, he started to laugh. That was when something unbelievable happened. Suddenly, the old man took a side step and simply disappeared among the trees. We shined the flashlight everywhere, but there was no one there. Everything was deserted. Terrified, we began to run frantically back home. On the way, desperate, we heard something approaching quickly. Noah turned and commented, puzzled, that the old man couldn't run that fast. Then we heard that same laugh again, right behind us. I looked back, but it was in vain, as the darkness was complete. We were exhausted when we saw a friend's house and shouted his name at the top of our lungs. It was quite strange because he didn't answer despite all our yelling. Only his dog appeared, running and barking incessantly. With no other options, we kept running. I looked at the group and asked why we hadn't shot the old man since we were armed. Owen, who handled the shotgun ammunition, explained that he had dropped the cartridges when jumping the fence and that the guns only had one shot left. Tyler, in turn, commented that a single shot would be enough. Noah interrupted, saying he didn't want to go to jail for murder. Owen then looked at him and retorted, "But what if it's not a person?" As we ran, we realized that no one was following us anymore, so we slowed down. Soon we reached the church. We sat down to rest a bit and talked about what had happened. After a while, we said goodbye to our friends and returned home, arriving around 10:30 p.m. We were dirty and sweaty when Tyler expressed his desire to take a shower. At that time, the bathroom was located outside the house. 10 minutes later, he came back running and in a panic, locked the door, and explained that he had noticed something moving around the bathroom. He said he heard footsteps coming from the woods, and the noise sounded like a dog sniffing, though with strange sounds and grunts. William laughed and joked, saying that Tyler was getting scared for no reason, as it could just be a lost cow or even a horse. However, Tyler insisted that if it were one of those animals, he would recognize it. Besides, he mentioned smelling a very strong stench of carrion, as if something rotten was in the air. Shortly after, we started hearing a bizarre noise coming from the front door, as if something was sniffing. Seconds later, the same horrible smell filled the air, so strong that we could barely breathe. Despite the fear, my curiosity grew about what might be lurking outside. I approached the crack in the door, and at that moment, a chill ran down my spine. Outside, I glimpsed a figure covered in black fur. It was crouched with its back turned, having a human-like appearance. Its ears were drooping. The scene terrified me, and my eyes remained fixed on it. My brothers soon appeared and noticed my shock. When Tyler finally looked, he froze in surprise. That was when the creature turned and lunged at the door with full force. Startled, we fell backward. The commotion was so intense that the neighborhood dogs began barking and running toward our house. Without hesitation, they attacked the creature. We heard heavy footsteps quickly moving away, probably fleeing from the dogs. A few minutes later, Everything went silent again. We sat on the floor, stunned by what we had just witnessed. Tyler broke the silence, commenting that our father was always right when he said werewolves existed. Faced with the whole situation, I remembered my nightmare and decided to share everything with them. William listened attentively and commented that it might have been a sign of fate. We stayed awake all night, alert to any noise. We were apprehensive about the possibility of that creature returning and invading our home. Only in the morning, after that terrifying night, were we finally able to sleep. Hours later, I woke up and it was already 2:30 p.m. My brothers were already awake and mentioned that everyone in the region was aware of what had happened the night before. The atmosphere became quite agitated with so many stories circulating. Some claimed to have seen the creature running, while others said they saw it feeding on dogs and other animals, leaving a trail of destruction wherever it went. Later that day, Noah and Owen came to our house. We told them what had happened and they were stunned. Shortly after, they mentioned that this might have something to do with the old man from the cabin because of the gold. However, to be honest, none of us were willing to give up that amount of money. That was when I turned around and showed them the peculiar book I had discovered at the bottom of the chest. No one could understand what was written, but there were images of human beings, animals, and some strange drawings that looked like specters. I must admit, it had a rather eerie appearance. After that night, a few weeks passed without any unusual events. The subject seemed to have been forgotten. We had already exchanged the gold for other lands near our home. That way, we managed to move to a neighborhood closer to the city, where there were more houses and people. Our friends followed the same path. I continued with that mysterious book even after several months. When October of that year arrived, I received news that devastated me. We were informed that a body had been discovered in the woods, completely disfigured. Sadness consumed us when we found out it was our friend Noah. Those were moments of extreme sorrow. Due to the condition of the body, the wake was held with a closed casket. No one could understand what could have caused that to him, but I must confess I already had my suspicions. People said that on the night Noah disappeared, he had been at a bar. At some point he left alone and drunk. It was probably at that moment that something attacked him. William, apprehensive, mentioned that it could have been that entity that appeared the night we found the gold. However, Owen disagreed, saying it didn't make sense, especially after so much time had passed. On the other hand, Tyler thought it did make sense since werewolves were always said to be treacherous creatures. Then I questioned what we should do. William, quite nervous, suggested that we should hunt down the creature and destroy it. However, Owen opposed the idea as he was engaged and expecting a child. For him, the best option was to leave as soon as possible. We agreed with his decision and wished him good luck, and he said his goodbyes. After a few weeks, rumors began circulating about a black-furred creature that was attacking animals in the area. The situation worsened when people started to disappear. Many joined the police in search efforts, but unfortunately the results were always tragic. Lifeless bodies were discovered. It was painful to witness the population's desperation in the face of that terrifying situation. The community was in shock. Many were restless and enraged, deciding to form groups to hunt down the entity responsible for the horror. Before long they found the demonic creature. Fear took hold of everyone. At that moment, only a few had the courage to use their weapons, but all attempts were in vain as the creature always managed to escape. With all this insecurity, several families abandoned their homes. Those who decided to stay, having no alternative, tried to remain calm despite the adversity. Sometime later one night, I was at home when I heard heavy footsteps outside. I rushed to grab my gun for safety and went to the window. I examined every corner, trying to understand what was happening. That's when I saw that elderly man. He realized he was being watched, approached the window, and stated that I had something that belonged to him. Right after, he asked to take it back. At that moment, immense irritation took over me and I shouted, saying I had nothing left, that I had already consumed all the gold. The old man stared at me seriously with a threatening look, and declared that I had only 2 nights to return it, or he would bring pain to everyone involved that night. Additionally, he emphasized that no weapon would be able to protect me. I confessed that a wave of fury invaded me, and I stormed out of the house, ready to attack him. The man was standing about 10 meters from me. That's when I heard something moving toward me. I turned quickly and came face to face with that strange creature moving stealthily. I could see the entity more clearly. It was immense, with dark fur, drooping ears, and large, deformed teeth. However, what impressed me the most were its eyes. Contrary to the usual descriptions, they were white. I felt a scorching desperation, unable even to aim my weapon. But suddenly, something surprised me. I saw that old man raise his hand and the creature stopped immediately. Then he turned to me with a look full of malice and reiterated that I had 2 more nights. After that, he simply walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the night. The creature did the same, leaving only a wave of fear and despair within me. I can't explain it, but from what I witnessed, that man had control over the werewolf. That was a terrifying night. The next morning, early, I went to Tyler's house to tell him what had happened. However, when I arrived, I noticed that the door and windows were all marked with scratches. Distressed, I called out for him, but there was no answer. Instinctively, I broke the window and entered. The kitchen door, which led to the backyard, was open. I walked toward the yard, where there was a huge mango tree, and I found him hanging there. I called out to him several times, but he wouldn't come down. So, I decided to summon William to come over. As soon as Tyler saw us, he finally came down. He was pale, appearing to be in a state of shock. We offered him a glass of sugared water to help him calm down. Then I asked him what had happened. With a calmer demeanor, he began to tell his story. According to him, when he came out of the bathroom, he found that situation at the front door. The creature had entered the house silently without him noticing, as he had forgotten to close the door. From his description, it was the same horrendous creature he had seen before. Something demonic that seemed to have come straight from hell. When he found himself face to face with that distorted mouth, which seemed to form a subtle smile, his only thought was to run. That's when he noticed a machete in the kitchen, grabbed it, turned around, and aimed the blade at the creature. However, it did not react and continued advancing slowly toward him, as if savoring his fear. Realizing that the machete would be useless, he threw it at the creature and ran toward the backyard, climbing up the tree where we found him. He went on to say that the creature left the house and began sniffing the air, searching for him. At that moment, it managed to rise, reaching about 2 meters in height. It was a moment of intense terror. Soon after, it realized he was up in the tree and tried to climb, but it failed. After several attempts, the monster growled furiously and let out grunts. Then, a voice echoed, ordering it to come down. It was probably that strange old man. Tyler said he started to feel unwell, nearly passing out while in the tree, but he did his best to stay strong. He was fully aware that if he fell, he was done for. He stayed up there for hours, even after the creature had disappeared. It was just before dawn when we arrived. I confess we were speechless after hearing all that. We thanked God that nothing worse had happened. Inside the house, I mentioned what had happened to me and expressed my belief that the old man might have some kind of control over the creature. William suggested he could be a gypsy or had made a pact to control the werewolf. But since we weren't sure, we decided to investigate the truth. We headed to the city and discovered that there was a group of gypsies in Cabo. So we went there to talk. We were warmly welcomed by everyone. I got straight to the point and asked about a certain book, questioning whether it could be used for some kind of magic or spell. When we spoke about the disappearances and the creature we had seen, they started laughing and showing disbelief in our story. Even so, I kept insisting, stating that my brother and I had witnessed and even suffered an attack from a werewolf. That's when one of the men approached and asked when it had happened. Tyler replied that it was the previous night and mentioned a skeletal old man with a long beard and dark eyes who was beside the creature. At that moment, the revelation came. The gypsy revealed that he knew that man but clarified that he was not a gypsy. Rather, he was someone who had made a pact. Such people often use ancient books to access spells. I mentioned that I had found a book in that old cabin and that I couldn't decipher any of the words in it. The gypsy explained that the text was written in a very ancient language, almost forgotten. Shortly after, he asked if I still had the book with me. I replied that I had left it at home and suggested that we go there, but he refused, claiming that he could not get involved in this. So, I proposed fetching it so he could take a look. This time he agreed. Later, when I returned with the book, the man explained that it was bound to the person who made the pact. That was why the old man wanted to retrieve it. After sharing all this, the gypsy advised me to return the book as soon as possible but warned us to be extremely careful, as the old man might try to take our lives as well. After these revelations, upon returning home, we devised a plan to deliver the book and called some people to help us capture the creature. Some locals volunteered, but we were few and most of us didn't even have weapons. Still, we found a solution. We would use machetes, iron bars, and wooden sticks for our defense. I believe there were about 10 of us. That should be enough. The day passed swiftly and soon night fell. The cold that came with it made the atmosphere even darker and more melancholic. We decided to head to a nearby farm to set up an ambush. The property owner joined us. Our determination was clear: to resolve this situation once and for all. I positioned myself in front of the house while he and my brothers hid inside, near the door. Other men concealed themselves among the surrounding trees. We also brought 4 dogs to assist us. A feeling of fear began to spread, but I stood firm. Then, at precisely 11 p.m., a nauseating stench of decay and sulfur filled the air. That was when I saw the silhouette of the old man emerging from the brush around the house. With a sinister voice, he asked if I had what belonged to him. I answered affirmatively, informing him that I had the book with me. Without hesitation, I stepped forward and handed it to him. The old man gave me a macabre smile, turned around, and walked away without uttering another word. Suddenly, a loud bang shattered the silence. A gunshot fired from inside the house. I was in shock. My brother William had shot the old man in the head. The fright made me fall to the ground. It was then that, in the darkness, I glimpsed the silhouettes of 3 beings. That's right, 3. They moved quickly among the trees. I couldn't see clearly, but I remember that one of them was extremely thin and almost hairless. I realized they were approaching me. If it weren't for my brothers and the armed men who started shooting, I wouldn't have been able to escape. The sound of gunfire made the creatures retreat, and I took the opportunity to run back into the house and grab the shotgun the farmer had lent me. Driven by deep resentment, we approached the old man's body and fired a few more rounds to make sure he wouldn't get up. Amidst the chaos, we noticed that one of the creatures had been killed, but tragically 2 men lost their lives in that terrifying battle. That was when we realized that we were still being watched by the last creature, which seemed to be acting more cautiously. We moved closer together, ready for anything. There were only 4 or 5 of us left at that moment. The darkness was overwhelming, but luckily we had some flashlights. We could hear the being moving around us, circling us. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. The farmer was suddenly attacked and dragged by his leg. He screamed in desperation, pleading for help. When we pointed the flashlight, we saw the creature pulling him toward the brush. Without thinking twice, we began shooting at the beast, which released him, but not before delivering a brutal blow to his head, leaving him motionless. Soon after, we realized that the aberration was still circling us, as if calculating the best way to attack. Minutes passed, filled with tension and fear. Then, abruptly, the creature lunged at my brother William, who let out a scream. Tyler did not hesitate. With a machete in hand, he charged at the creature, yelling. In desperation, we also threw ourselves at the beast. The darkness made it nearly impossible to see. Only the flashes from the flashlights illuminated fragments of what was unfolding. But what I managed to see was enough to haunt me to this day. We began striking the creature with forceful blows. Gunshots rang out, and screams of rage and terror mingled in the chaos. One of the men accidentally grazed my arm with a bullet, but in the heat of the moment, I barely noticed. The beast took advantage of the disorder and attacked William, who, despite being wounded, urged us to finish off the monster quickly. That was when a precise shot to the head finally brought the beast down, collapsing lifelessly onto the ground. We all froze in shock. When I turned around, I saw my brother lying there, his eyes open and lifeless. Tyler and I were devastated, but at least that nightmare was finally over. With tear-filled eyes and overwhelming hatred, we set fire to the remains of the creatures and the cursed old man's body. The next morning, we buried William. I will never forget that moment beside Tyler. After everything that happened, it was just the 2 of us left in the world. Shortly afterward, Tyler decided to leave for Massachusetts. He used the resources from the properties and land he sold to start a new life, build a family, and move forward. On the other hand, I chose to stay here to this day. I rarely see my brother, and I must admit, I miss him terribly. Anyway, this is my testimony. I will never escape the memories of those long days of nightmares that still haunt me. Many years have passed, yet the images of those experiences remain vividly imprinted in my mind. I am fully certain that I will take these unbelievable moments to my grave. Moments that only confirm the existence of things beyond our imagination.